This happened about 4 years ago, right after my divorce. I was 34, completely burned out, and desperate for a fresh start. My apartment lease was ending. I had almost no furniture left, and every day felt exactly the same. I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody knew me, somewhere I could finally sleep without hearing traffic outside my window. Buying a house wasn't even part of the plan. Then I found the listing. It appeared late one night while I was scrolling through property websites. The house looked almost too perfect. 2 stories, a wraparound porch, large maple trees surrounding the yard, a detached garage, almost an acre of land. The price was less than half of every other house in the area. I assumed it was a mistake, but the listing stayed online for weeks. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I called the real estate agent. There was a long silence after I mentioned the address. Then she asked, "You're serious?" I laughed. "I guess." She sighed before saying, "I can show it tomorrow." The next afternoon, I drove almost 3 hours into a small town I'd never heard of. The streets were quiet. Most of the houses looked well maintained. Children rode bicycles. People waved as I drove past. Nothing felt unusual until I reached the property. The house sat alone at the end of a narrow gravel road. It wasn't falling apart. In fact, it looked surprisingly well cared for. Fresh white paint covered the walls. The roof looked almost new. The lawn had recently been cut. Only one thing felt strange. There were no neighboring houses close enough to see, just trees. Hundreds of trees. The real estate agent was already waiting outside. She barely smiled. Instead of giving me the usual sales pitch, she unlocked the front door and simply said, "I'll wait outside." That surprised me. "You're not coming in?" She shook her head. "I've seen it enough." Inside, everything smelled of old wood and fresh paint. Sunlight poured through large windows. The floors creaked slightly, but the place was beautiful. The kitchen had been renovated. The fireplace still worked. Every bedroom overlooked the forest. It was exactly what I wanted. Still, something felt off, not haunted, not dangerous, just watched. Every room gave me the strange feeling that someone had just stepped outside before I arrived. I checked every closet, every bathroom, the attic, the basement. Nothing. The basement was unfinished but dry. The attic contained only dust. When I walked back outside, I smiled. "I'll take it." The agent looked at me for several seconds. Then she quietly asked, "Did anyone tell you why it's so cheap?" I said no. She hesitated. "The last 3 owners left within a year." I laughed. "That's it?" She didn't laugh back. "They all left most of their belongings behind." I assumed she was trying to make the house sound mysterious. Maybe she enjoyed telling ghost stories. I signed the paperwork 2 weeks later. Moving day was quiet. Too quiet. A local moving company dropped off my furniture before sunset. One of the workers asked, "So, you're really staying here?" I smiled. "That's the plan." He looked back at the house. Then he said something I'll never forget. "If you hear knocking after midnight." He stopped himself. His co-worker immediately interrupted. "Let's go." Neither of them explained what he meant. By sunset, I was alone. The silence was incredible. No traffic, no sirens, no barking dogs, just wind moving through the trees. That night, I cooked dinner, unpacked a few boxes, and sat on the porch watching the stars. For the first time in months, I actually felt at peace. Around 11 o'clock, I locked every door and went upstairs. The bedroom overlooked the backyard. Beyond it stretched nothing but dark forest. I fell asleep almost immediately. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. I opened my eyes. The room was completely dark. I looked at the clock beside my bed. 12:17 a.m. I held my breath. Maybe it came from the pipes. Old houses make strange noises. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it sounded like someone was knocking on the front door. I stayed perfectly still. Who would come all the way out here after midnight? After nearly a minute of silence, I convinced myself I had imagined it. I rolled over and closed my eyes. Then, the knocking started again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from downstairs. It was coming from somewhere inside the house. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The knocking echoed through the hallway outside my bedroom. 3 slow knocks, not loud, not violent, just deliberate. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and slowly walked downstairs. The front door was still locked. I looked through the peephole. No one was outside. The porch was empty, and the only sound came from the wind moving through the trees. I told myself it was just an old house making strange noises. Then, knock, knock, knock. This time it came from the kitchen. I rushed toward the sound and immediately noticed something strange. The window above the sink was slightly open. I was certain I had locked it before going to bed. Cold air drifted into the room. I closed the window, searched every room in the house, checked every closet, even looked in the basement. Nothing. The rest of the night passed in complete silence. The next morning, I drove into town to buy groceries. The cashier glanced at my address and quietly asked, "You're living in that house?" When I nodded, he simply replied, "Don't get attached." Before I could ask what he meant, he handed me my receipt and called for the next customer. Later that afternoon, I explored an old shed hidden behind the house. Inside, beneath a dusty workbench, I found a cardboard box filled with old family photographs. Each picture showed different people standing in front of the same house, different years, different owners. But the last photograph caught my attention. A smiling couple stood on the front porch, holding a "sold" sign. Someone had violently scratched both of their faces out. As I stared at the photo, I heard slow footsteps outside the shed. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I hurried outside, expecting to see someone. The yard was completely empty. Only a line of muddy, barefoot footprints stretched across the grass toward the forest. None of them came back. That night, I decided to stay awake. Everything remained quiet until exactly 2:31 a.m. Without warning, every light in the house switched off. The microwave clock was still glowing, so the power hadn't failed. Before I could react, 3 slow knocks echoed from the attic. Then I heard something heavy, taking slow, deliberate steps across the ceiling above my bedroom. For the first time since moving in, I realized I wasn't afraid of the house anymore. I was afraid of whatever was inside it.